Introducing aPriori.
Right. So Rob, thanks very much for joining us. Rob has been another great party for us to work with, and Jill Schneider, who's at GEA as well. They've really worked with us collaboratively over the last few years as they've been deploying aPriori, giving us feedback about what they're trying to do and how they're trying to evolve it. So we thought this would be a great opportunity to hear from Rob. He has so much experience across the industry. He's really worked not only as an operating member of an organization from a procurement perspective, but also with PE firms who are working with a host of manufacturing companies. So, he's been looking at how to scale organizations from many different perspectives. So Rob, thanks for joining us. So, there are a number of things that I wanted to ask Rob about because, the supply chain disruption has been such a challenge over the past several years. So we're going to cover a number of different areas, but first, Rob, I wanted to talk about what you're seeing, how are companies addressing supply chain disruptions, at the tail end of the pandemic right through now, like what are the approaches that they're taking, even if they're tactical?
Yeah, so, when COVID first came in, we were well established in a playbook and we were going down a path of transforming our spend culture, using should-cost modeling, et cetera, and then we got this T-bone on supply chain disruption and everything that's happening. So we really buried and went very tactical and looked at, we had to go back. We did our end-step sourcing process, whether it was a 6-step, 8-step, 12-step sourcing process. We checked all the boxes. We checked the technical requirements and engineering signed off on that. We checked the commercial requirements at the tier 1, tier 2 level. Little did we know that we needed to peel back the onion and go even further into tier 4, tier 5, and in some cases really understand where the raw material is coming from, transition that into where we are now. How many of you are watching the potential rail strike on any either capital equipment, parts, anything that might be coming on rail? I never thought I would be sitting in a line of balance and explaining where we were with regards to PPE, masks, gloves, all of the, the sprays that was happening in the social distancing. And then lastly is on the packaging, right? We had suppliers that were coming in and they couldn't get labor, so we were short on corner posts. So our lines of balances traditionally, where we were looking at a tier 1, tier 2 level, really transformed into where are they getting gas from Russia? Are they going to be turned off? Are they going to be able to manufacture? Are they getting power shortages from China? And are they getting brownouts? And so it became very, very comprehensive, and that was on the tactics side. So as you look at in your question around coming out of it, we've overhauled our entire end-step sourcing process and those technical requirements, commercial sign-offs to validate a supplier and also to enhance the existing supplier. I think now is an opportunity to start going back into the supply base and clawing back some of the lost productivity they had because they had to social distance and some of the enhancements that they were putting into their manufacturing operations. Now is a great opportunity to go back in there and say, look, you're no longer social distancing. Are you getting 30 pieces per hour? Are you back up to what you originally quoted at 45 or 50 pieces per hour?
Great, thanks, Rob. So that's kind of the tactical approach, right? And in the last hour, you've heard a lot of discussion about supply chain resiliency. What are you seeing? Like, what are some of the initiatives to create sort of that more long-term resiliency? So, like, if you look in front of us, this was a slide that Rob developed, and it was an interesting one because it's not just the last couple of years that we've had disruptions. It really goes back. Globalization has really impacted everybody, I think, right? From the perspective of any issues that happen anywhere in the world disrupt your supply chains.
Yeah, you're right. Supply chain disruptions aren't anything new. I think what's new is the compounding effect of it. So trucks used to break down, but you'd get another driver within hours, right? Now trucks are breaking down, and because of the labor shortage and driver shortages, you can get a driver for another 24, 36 hours, and then they may time out, or they're back to the the shuttling of the trucks and et cetera. So I think from a longer term, we were buried in so much minutia in the last 2 years, looking outwardly and we've compiled a tremendous amount of data around what are the cost drivers of our supply base, what's happening in freight and transportation, what's happening in various provinces, states, countries with regards to reactions to COVID, reactions to RSV, any of the issues that could result in labor shortages. use that information, now look outward. So look inwardly and then push all that information outwardly. Hopefully we didn't, but in hindsight, did we capture that as part of a data lake? Are we able to quickly access that information and pull that information to use it to our advantage now? The market's coming back, the market will come back. Hopefully labor comes back. I'm in an industry now where we have the need for 1,000 additional technicians and we can't hire. Last week we turned over 34 and we hired 30. So it's gonna come back. So I would say from a strategic perspective is take that information that you've gathered over the last few years, put it into a data lake and start pulling it and refreshing it and using it to your advantage.
That's great. So, so was there, as you looked at the data that you collected, or if you can think back to the data you collected, were there any insights that you kind of looked back and said, oh, I wish I'd captured that?
Yeah, so we were on a mission to dual source, eliminate as much single sourcing, sole sourcing as possible. It was always the investment that precluded us from doing that. So it was not really the piece price, but it was the investment. So we would run the should cost modeling on tooling. We'd go in, we'd present it. Now, I think because of the disruptions in the supply chains, that's being more received by the P&L owners, by the programs, to widen the budgets, lesser some hurdle rates, so that you can actually have multi-sourcing or dual sourcing. So that was information we collected. The other was where we were single sourced or double sourced or multi-sourced. Fortunately or unfortunately, we were in one country. So we had a commodity that was dual sourced in China. Well, when the pandemic hit, that didn't help us. It would have behooved us to have somebody in Mexico and somebody in China, somebody in the US. Diversification, what is the right country to source in based on the potential supply-based disruptions? There's another area, probably a lot of engineers in here. I'm a pretend engineer. I'm a business undergrad, borderline industrial engineer with an MBA. Jill would sometimes let me dabble into the should cost modeling, although she never gave me a license, which is probably good. But, so I view this as we're transitioning more into what I call a business failure modes and effects analysis. It's almost like a BFMEA instead of a DFMEA. And what I mean by that is, right, and I'm lesser focused on the risk priority number as much as I'm focused on the severity, the occurrence, and the frequency, right? The product of that gives you an RPN. So what do I mean by that is we could have saved $1 by sourcing a part in China, but if I had to air freight that 2-3 times for a month, did the dollar all of a sudden lost diminishing returns and I lost the dollar savings? Do scenario planning around if I have to fast boat it for a period of time, if I have to air freight it for a period of time, at what point, how many times or how often will that happen before I've lost these savings? So we're transitioning from more of a first cost focus, and I know we talk about it, but total cost of ownership through the life cycle of the part. And what does that BFMEA, this business failure modes and effects analysis, what does that prove and what does that tell you?
Great, okay. And then, as just staying on the data topic for a minute, you talked about the gaps that you had. Is there new data that you'd like to be able to bring into the conversation? Anything that, kind of looking forward from a strategic perspective that you'd want to bring into the conversation?
Yeah, I think anything around value chain analysis, the supply chain, obviously designed for sustainability, right? We talked all the good talk and we thought we had carbon footprint. We thought we had good business continuity planning. So if a certain area was going to go down, they would transition it over to another area, maybe even another country. So that data, it's one skill set and skill set to receive a business continuity plan. I think it takes a new skill set to be able to digest that BCP and really, is it a validated, a true, well thought out business plan? So peeling back and having a system where you can have a true business continuity plan, you can test it. Again, I would make that part of the business FMEA.
Great. So let's move on to, we talked a lot about the data in the last few minutes. What about processes, right? So how are processes changing, to meet, the supply chain resilience issues and this dynamic of, ongoing change as we're moving from year to year?
Yeah, I think one of the critical processes that changed for us was really, it was lesser about the design engineer did the design, sourcing went out to market and did, took their 4 to 6 week slow process that slows everyone down. Packaging did their thing, logistics did their thing, and then you got together again cross-functionally and sourced it. I do, by the way, Alstom, I'm disappointed. I thought we were one of the first to do zero RFQ. No offense, Alstom, but we were going down that path as well. But I think that is a critical factor going forward. As the design is iterating, you're doing your should cost modeling, you're doing your DFAs, DFMs, and you're designed for sustainability and designed for supply chain. Working with the supplier and nurturing a relationship. Look, we were very good at negotiating costs. It became a very new thing for me and my team, a new element to negotiate allocations, right? So you think back to, I've got a relationship, I'm either nurturing the relationship or I'm teetering on a potential bad relationship. When it came to some of the critical components and wiring harnesses, such as terminals and et cetera, and the PCBA boards with chips, and then having to understand all the way back to lead frames, all the way back to wafers and et cetera, those customers were, while we were doing supplier relationship management, they were all doing customer relationship management. So where did we fall in the segmentation? So a process that's changed that I was driving was nurture the existing relationships. If they're coming in and asking for a price increase, traditionally, right, we're sourcing, we beat them over the head, we get them down, and, they're teetering on profitability or not. Nurture the relationships because it's a game of, in some categories, it's still a game of allocation, not necessarily a price reduction in negotiation, but the total value chain and the costs that are driving to get the part there. It's lesser about reducing the piece price now, and it's more about the total landed cost and total cost of ownership.
Great. You talked about those process changes. How, I think Tristan talked about it too from an engineering perspective, about how do you get design engineers to change their process. As you looked at some of the things you've just talked about, how do you get the procurement side, the sourcing side, the supply chain side to change their process?
Yeah, I like to sometimes call it culture hacks too, but and intentionally doing some culture hacks. But what I would say is a lot of the engineers over the last couple of years were so busy in looking at alternatives and substitutes and validating those substitutes. Again, don't ever let a good crisis go to waste, right? So how do you prevent them from forcing them to do that again? So leverage the two of what they currently did, which Tristan talked about, but also this, you don't want to have to go through and revalidate, find a substitute or an alternative. That, in my opinion, is a lot of wasted time. So how do you bridge that into more of, let's take a variation of an existing part to create a new part, fit, form, or function, and how do you leverage more of your PLM, your parts library, to use existing parts, carryover parts, variants of an existing part versus designing something new. I think then you can also influence them with identifying, hey, you're going down this design path. Did you know you're adding $1, you're adding $5? There's a lesser, more value-added way of approaching the design.
Yeah. So I think as we were working on this, we saw this information come up, and I think, Rob, what you're talking to is, going through this change of really being a tactical organization that's driving efficient processes to one that's evolving towards helping to be a strategic partner to drive growth in the future, right?
Yeah, where I go, I try to change the messaging. For example, I don't want to be viewed as a cost out function, right? So purchasing's here to get a cost out. Purchasing's here to get savings. I'd like to frame it up as we're an organization that is returning a minimum of 3x our organization costs. So I measure our organization not only on a percentage of savings, but also on a return of organization costs, fully burdened, full all costs in. Secondly is I'm here to expand your margins and grow your margins, not here to just achieve cost savings. So gathering data, back to the data point, is understanding the data as a material as a percentage of the revenue, material as a percentage of the selling price. So that, look, I was in an environment, just recently, I'm in an environment now where there's heavy promotional periods. So you're out there and you're fighting every single day, and the sales professionals are reducing price to be able to compete in the market, to get floor spots, to get end caps, to get racetracks. So how are you competing in that during the variation? And really having an understanding of material as a percentage of the selling price and saying you can afford to reduce your selling price, you're not going to give up margin, or you're not going to have margin erosion. How am I able to help them in building their margins and increasing margins versus I got you $1. I saved you $1.
Yeah, that's great. So it's really, I think it speaks to what you were talking about a few minutes ago about creating that partnership,
That's right.
With the shared business outcome. As you're evolving that, how we talked a little bit about driving change, and I think as we were thinking about this, you were talking about you can't just do it tops down, right? It's tops down and bottoms up, but how do you do that?
Yeah, well, it can be delicate based on the personalities of the top, and the personalities of the bottom, to be honest with you. But what we did, or what I try to do, is dabble them with influencers. So and some call it microbursts of information. I think back to when reverse auctions, and everybody probably remembers when reverse auctions were the hot thing, and everybody was doing OLQs and running reverse auctions. I don't know about y'all, but I'd put the C-suite. I would do a reverse auction in the conference room right by the C-suite. We'd have some popcorn. Hey, come on in, look at this tooling auction. Come on in, look at this piece price auction. It generated some enthusiasm. So have a monthly forum, and what I'm pleasantly surprised about it is our profession, and even before COVID. Chief supply chain officers, VPs of sourcing and procurement were kind of buried. They were reporting to a director. They may be reporting to a VP. Many of us are now, and the CEOs are recognizing the value that we're bringing. Many of us are now reporting directly to either a CEO, a CFO, or a COO, which is great. So I think when, understand the personality. So for example, if you have a heavy engineering technical CEO, we would dribble in information. We would do some simulations. We'd show him, here's the design areas that aPriori has spitted out as being potential cost drivers or cost increasers, DFA, DFM inhibitors. Here's the supply chain, and then here's some alternatives. And we religiously, wherever I've gone, I've asked for a monthly cost out review for the sourcing team to come in and present cross-functionally. What are we achieving not only on existing, but what could we be doing looking forward into, we call them MPIs, new product introductions, or your build phases of your new product launches. And then how can that correlate into the next evolution? And truly, I was really pounding on engineering to understand the life cycle of the parts that we were sourcing. So I will take a complete different approach if I'm sourcing a part for 1 year versus I'm sourcing a part for 3 or 5 years. If I'm sourcing it for 1 year, I'm absolutely going to have that first cost focus. I want to get first cost right because I don't have time after we launch to try to do VA, VE, and do simulations around, here's some potential cost savings. We'll do that as a running change. We'll do that down the road. If I'm sourcing it for 3 to 5 years, I may take a different approach, and I may, in those new NPI in those NPI reviews with the upper management and the senior leadership, I'm going to push hard, but we're going to put those on an opportunity roadmap and on a monthly basis report out where we are on the roadmap. So I think influencing through data, influencing through KPIs. If you're a COO, I'd like to influence them by, here's what we're doing to reduce complexity, which is going to translate into productivity, which is going to translate into potential labor savings. Another approach that I like to do is, and I started to do this in the power industry, was job 1 plus 30 days, NPI plus 30, 60, 90 days, is implement a post-project review process. Did you get the bang for the buck? Mm-hmm. So we changed a part, we changed a system, we changed an assembly, and the business case said we were going to take X hours of labor out, X material costs, we were going to increase revenue and potential share, we were going to eliminate 10 parts by making this change. Whatever frequency you determine, go back and have your cross-functional team do a post-project review, after-action review. Did you get the bang for the buck? Is there still that opportunity there? What would you have done different? What would you do different? And then present that out as part of these cost reviews. A lot of the cost reviews that I sat in when I inherited an organization, it was always, we ran an RFP package, we ran an RFQ, we worked with a consultant, we saved you $3 times the annual volume. Be more influencing, tell the story, and tell the story that satisfies every one of your key stakeholders. The C-suite, the COO, operations, even up to a point of HR, right? If they don't have to recruit more people with the labor shortages and you're able to reduce or redeploy resources, then tell the whole story. And that's where I think the skill set's changing, which we'll get to later on. But.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I would imagine that monthly reporting not only helped you with the executive level conversations, but also motivated individuals to actually change what they did as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when we were doing some de-gauging of some sheet metal, we couldn't get the plants to run the trials because they were labor short. We were so focused on closing the demand versus supply gap. We couldn't get trials ran. We couldn't get it implemented. And when we served it up to that cross-functional committee, which included the P&L owners, we started to get some traction around that. So sometimes it was healthy tension. Most of the time it was healthy tension. But yeah, sometimes you have to leverage that to get things done.
Great. All right, super. All right, well, let's move on a little bit further because we've got a number of other topics I think we want to talk about. Strategy versus tactics. I think you provided some great views of, strategy, but, how do they work together? How do you employ some of those strategies, but, make them real? I think, I had some data that talked about strategic initiatives. Not many of them are successful.
Yeah, 12% I think is what it said, which was frightening.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so look, I think it's an evolution and you just keep trying. So yes, it's very tactical and only 12% may stick and there's a lot of external information out on making sticky teams and making things stick. But I think if you're truly passionate around it, you have the business case, and it may not work first or right away, just bring it back, right? Have these roadmaps, constantly bringing in the information in front of them. Let it be your North Star. Like what did we do now? What's the after action review, post-project review tell me? I'm going to incorporate that in my strategy, and then I'm going to bring it back with a quarterly milestone of, I want to be at this North Star. I want to have zero RFQ on 80% of my spend. I'm going to start out with sheet metal. I'm going to then go to plastics, some of the basic tech processes, sheet metal, plastics, rubber components, maybe coil winding. But I'm going to have quarterly milestones that we report out on. You can't boil the ocean, and you bring it back and tie it into the North Star in the 5-year plan.
Yeah, and I think I recall you at certain points in time talking about specific tactics that you employed to support the strategies. Like I think some were like parts reconciliation and
that's right.
Part standardization. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we called it product architecture or part optimization, part rationalization. So in our programs, we would actually we started to measure, and I started to communicate at the senior leadership reviews, X number of parts are new, X number of parts are carryover, and X number of parts are modified. And we really started honing in on the new parts. Did they have to be new? And that's the beauty of having a centralized should costing organization. Because I remember the should cost engineer coming in saying, I've already costed a motor very similar to that. The only thing that's changing is the shaft length.
Right.
Why do we need to change the shaft length? Do I have a parts library? And despite us having it part of a standard operating procedure in some of the companies I've worked in for the engineer to go to the parts library and pull down and deviate, for some reason that step would get missed. So it's just reiterating and rebringing that up. And then I think also flushing out and having the should cost engineers and providing them a forum of what are you seeing? What is similar versus what's being designed new or what you're being asked to cost from a ground up?
Great. So given the transformation in sourcing that's occurred, through the course of COVID, have the skills changed? Like, are the skills that people needed 3 years ago the same as they are today?
I think they have changed, and I think they've changed significantly. Again, back to, I don't need professionals that are capable of doing 3 bids and a buy, running an RFI, down selecting to an RFP, down selecting to an RFQ, and then negotiating an RFQ. Mm-hmm. I need people who are able to do all of that, partner and influence the internal stakeholders, listen to the should cost engineers, partner with the design engineers, with manufacturing, and the supply base, by the way, because they're a very important aspect into this. But I'm looking for more influencers, more business case development, more that analytics approach. And I mentioned the basic tech processes, and we'll talk about this a little bit later too, but you can hire for, or you can train for basic tech processes. I'm a big fan of having both technical and commercial backgrounds in my organization, especially when you get to PCBs, PCBAs, wiring harness, some of the more EMD, some of the more complex assemblies and et cetera. So I think the skill sets have changed. I believe they're also going to continue to evolve. Again, you're a purchasing person, you're a materials management person, you're going to have to know end to end, including how do I challenge some of the design.
Yeah. So given that, because that's a pretty big change. How do you find those people, or do you train them? Like, how do you put people in those jobs?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So a combination of both is, like I said, on basic tech processes, you can train them up. I'll never forget, I knew a little bit about engines. I'm a farm rural boy from Ontario, Canada. So I knew how to change a push rod engine. I knew how to mess with that stuff. But once it started to get into some of the more complex engines, and I started buying engine components, I immediately enrolled in a 3-day engine teardown class. I took that teardown, and man, I just, maybe I'm one of those people that want to be an engineer, but so I learned from that. Some of the other tactics when I was in the marine industry, and People Mover and Elevator, and I know Coney's here, they actually offered layman's, non-technical training for some of our buying set. What are the most frequent purchase parts that I'm getting for a renovation or a remodel, or for what's breaking down, and educating them from a non-technical person. How do I teach them? Here's the parts you're buying, here's the fit, form, and function, here's how they work, here's how they interact together. So that part of it, I do think you can train. I do think some of this new skill set that's required with end-to-end, doing business continuity, evaluations and reviews, looking at different countries and different political unrest and everything else, that does take a different, right? So I would probably put people in those roles who have had a breadth of experience and a depth of experience, and look for probably more strong technical or kind of P&L ownership, if you will, to put them in some of these more roles, or these higher level, more complex roles.
And I'm going to throw a question at you that we didn't talk about, but just hearing what you're saying now triggered something else where you've got these skills for the job and sort of the economy and what's happening globally, but digitization is something that we're all talking about. To what extent do you require your team to have sort of those technical skills, familiarity with software, using different tools?
Yeah, so again, I steal from other organizations, but I shouldn't use the word steal, but I entice other organizations or people to join. You're right, because it's lesser about buying widgets now, because a lot of the MPIs are based on over-the-air, right, updates. It's more software. So having somebody that can actually do that cost-benefit analysis and/or should-cost model, if applicable, having that understanding is ideally having somebody that's been in the field, that's been in there working, and et cetera, because that is a whole new skill set. It's not enhancing, a part that's going to, pump water out faster or a compressor. It's going to get cooler or hotter. It's more about what are the over-the-air, going from touch to voice is a change. And if I'm a buyer buying a touch module versus a voice module, that's a different skill set, right? I mean, it's a different tool. Are you building an ecosystem with an existing provider? Are you starting from scratch? That's the evolution, I believe, at least in a lot of these consumer-facing products.
Yeah, and I think as it comes to our arena, I think you're actually requiring some certifications, right, from new organizations like the Society of Product Cost and Engineering and Analytics.
Absolutely. Yeah. So SPCEA, we're looking for certifications from that organization. Obviously, CPSM, IIAPS, International Institute of Applied Purchasing. So yes, certifications in a fleet example, right, is really branching off and getting some different certifications in different areas. Another area would be along from software, and Tristan, I was thinking about you when you presented this, because we're not too far away from, I'm now in the technician space, but we're not too far away from an HVAC technician maybe sitting in your basement or sitting in your attic doing a diagnostics, and if they need a tube, they're going to they'll pull it up on their phone and they'll 3D print it in the back of their van. Or if they need a gear, they're going to be printing it in the back of their van. So understanding a 3D printer, how do I source it? How do I write the materials? I don't think we're too far away from that concept, to be honest.
Interesting. All right, last question. And this is along the theme of the conference, ESG. There are a lot of requirements coming down in terms of ESG requirements and regulations that are, really starting to confront us as we're thinking about carbon impact, particularly in the context of Scope 3 emissions. So what plans or actions, if any, do you see CPOs taking to, sort of operate in that new realm?
Yeah, I think instead of talking the talk, we're starting to walk the talk. So making it a part of our sourcing decision and truly understanding, again, all those multi-tiers of where is the component, where's the part coming from, where's the material coming from, what's it take to get it, the raw materials, when you think about batteries and et cetera. So it's really becoming front of mind. Again, pre-pandemic, we were talking about it. One of the areas I was really monitoring was ocean freight and the clean fuel for the freighters. That got postponed, but that's going to come back. So again, are you going to be long distance? Are you going to be offshored, nearshored, or onshore? So that whole strategy, I think that's top of mind. Different regulations for different states. Obviously, look at what's happening in California and some of the greener states versus non-green states. How's that going to impact? Look at what's happening in Mexico. Obviously, what's happening in China. So I think it's becoming top of mind more and more for us here domestically. I do think Europe's ahead of us on this. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot we can learn from our European colleagues and other colleagues who are further ahead than us. But I also think it's becoming part of the design, and we've talked about it, and we'll talk about it later in the conference around design for sustainability and understanding that carbon footprint.
Great. Well, Rob, thanks so much for joining us today. And Rob's going to be around for the next couple of days. So if you want to corner him, he's a great person to talk to. Rob, thanks again. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
aPriori, making profitability and sustainability a reality for a better world.